You're a fourth-generation farmer.
Yeah, 1866, whatever that works out.
Because I know a lot of farmers out there are curious about what happened with Trump's Secretary of Agriculture nominee.
There's been such a failing of the Department of Agriculture in general.
I had hope that we would get ag. But something happens, as it always seems to.
The only real wealth I think there is the bounty of nature.
We're trying to inspire people to undertake this very challenging task of converting conventional styles of farming to what you do, which is full integration.
Vertical integration is exactly what does it.
I'm Nicole Shanahan. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. Will Harris, it's really good to be here with you today. It's been, I think, about 8.5 months or so since I was in Bluffton, Georgia at White Oak Pastures. I did a full day tour with you and your daughters, got to see your operation, got to see your Temple Grandin slaughterhouse. I mean, you really picked the best of all things and put it all together and fully integrated. Since we last connected, a lot's happened, obviously. At the time we first met, Bobby and I were still running on the ticket. Not long after that, we joined forces with Donald Trump, and MAGA and MAHA came together. I haven't connected with you since then. How did you feel about that? Because we were really excited about taking MAHA forward with an agriculture first approach.
You know, I really wanted you and Mr. Kennedy to be in a position to exert as much influence as possible in the way we do business in this country. And I trust it to you to know how, and I'm sure that was your goal as well. And I trust you to know how you can best do that. And, you know, when you were here, I was excited about you all being contenders for the presidency and the vice presidency. You know things about politics I certainly don't know. If that was not to work out, I'm sure you chose the path that would be most beneficial for the nation. And I trust that. And I'm still with you.
Well, thank you very much. That means a whole heck of a lot. You're one of the best ranchers we have here in the United States, and a prime example of what could be as we look at hopefully really restoring our agricultural lands and our pasture lands. What you've managed to accomplish at White Oak is incredible. And I just want to recap for people who don't know your story. You're a fourth-generation farmer. And it's your great-grandfather started the farm over 130 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, 1866, whatever that works out to be, 150 or so, yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And the way he farmed and the way you farm now are not so dissimilar, but the middle generations, they fell in line and in love with all the big agrochemical vaccine approaches, what was considered modern and savvy at the time, right?
You're right. My great-grandfather and grandfather ran the farm as a food production operation. They raised a number of species of animals, cows, hogs, sheep, goats, whatever, poultry, on the farm. And every day before day, they and their employees slaughtered something 6 days a week. It might have been a cow, it might have been a few hogs, it might have been a bunch of chickens. And they would drive it 2 miles up the dirt road to Bluffton, where I'm sitting now, the town in southwest Georgia, and peddle the meat. And it was that was before USDA, it was before food safety, it was before refrigeration, it was before internal combustion engines. but it worked as a food production system for this little town. My dad modernized the farm post-World War II, and it became a commodity cattle operation, industrial cattle operation. I went to the University of Georgia. I came home and ran it as an industrial cattle operation for 20 years. And then I moved back into something that wound up resembling what my great-grandfather and grandfather did.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. And you're direct to consumer, which is a model that people are finding is the best way for a rancher to be fully self-sufficient, but also profitable, is to fully vertically integrate. What does that mean? Can you walk us through the steps you took to fully vertically integrate your operation and go direct to consumer? Because that's a
Yeah,
big operation. That's basically taking, three different um, big ag corporate processes, shrinking it down and vertically integrating it for one company under one hat.
3 is exactly the right number. That's right. We raise the animals here on the farm. We raise cows, hogs, sheep, goats, poultry, some other things. And so often we farmers get so tied up with that production leg, the three legs on the stool. The production leg is what we are so enamored with. But consumers don't buy cows and hogs and sheep. They buy beef and pork and lamb. So it's got to be converted. And we built USDA inspected slaughter plants on the farm, one for poultry, one for red meat. But then there's a third leg on the stool, and that's marketing, getting it to the consumer. And really, that's what we've struggled with most in the last 20 years, 25 years.
It's worth the struggle, though, wouldn't you say, once you get to the other side of it all? Or if you knew 20 years ago what it would take, would you do it again?
I would. I would. I have 2 daughters and their spouses who are here on the farm, and they wouldn't have come back to do what I used to do. It just would not have been appealing to them. And but they're back and they've got babies, and I feel like that'd be the 6th generation that there's a high likelihood is likely to come back.
I mean, my experience when I visited was it was really a dream American farm, and people have nostalgia for that right now. They really do. They don't know how to get there because it's expensive. It's really hard to go from a calf breeding operation to a pasture raised rotational grazing operation to then setting things up so that you can process and package on site. Meanwhile, in the background, doing supply chain distributions across the country. The people want to get there. It's not just here in America. I was just in El Salvador, and they import 80% of their food to that country. And the quality of meat, let me tell you, I just, I tried the bacon. I wouldn't recommend it.
There's so much wrong with what we do to food in this country, and it's really hard on the land, the water, the atmosphere. It's hard on the animals in terms of animal welfare. And it's just devastating for the economy of rural America. And we could name some more stuff that's not pleasant about it, but those are the 3 topics that we really focus on at White Oak Pastures. And I got to say, I'm really pleased with the progress we've made in all 3 of them.
It is. It's even have the quaintest shop that my team and I, when we arrived there, we just kind of floated through it because it was just so happy, and all of the products that we love and adore were there. And we still talk about the milk that we were able to pick up. It was the creamiest, most delicious milk I've tried. And then you have the restaurant as well. So anyone listening to this, you must go visit Bluffton, Georgia, and check out White Oak Pastures, because you will taste some of the finest beef grown in America, cooked to perfection. and enjoy just experience as well. So you've created also a glamping experience, which is very, I'm here in the Bay Area, and everyone from San Francisco will get out of town on the weekends to go glamping. So how is that going?
It is really good. It's not a super profitable part of our farm, but it gets people here, and that has a lot of long-term benefits. We have bought just about every house that's sold in this little town of Bluffton in the last 20 years, and we provide some of it for employee housing, but others is for guests, and we really enjoy having guests. And I will say this, I appreciate what you're saying about White Oak Pastures, but I'm really not pleased about the fact that we ship product to 48 states. And we do as much volume as I want to do. I don't want to grow the business. It's as big as I want it to be. But I don't want to ship product to 48 states. I want to be a local provider. And local to me, that doesn't mean Bluffton, Georgia. I can't do that. We've only got 150 people here. But I really, instead of us shipping beef to 48 or products to 48 states, I wish there were 48 or 68 or 88 other farmers like us. I don't know what the number is, but all over the country selling their production locally to their customers. That's the way it needs to be. Currently, I have to ship beef to 48 states or product to 48 states to have enough volume to make my business work. That's not the way I want it to be.
Meanwhile, people in your region are likely eating beef imported from outside and labeled American grown, because there's this really silly law that's still stuck in place, and you've articulated it really well. But we have Brazilian grown beef getting shipped into the United States, and if it's processed in the United States, it can be labeled American grown. I mean, that's insane.
It's insane and it's intentional. For many years, product of the USA with reference to beef meant born, raised, and slaughtered in this country in the 50 states. Then 2015, it was intentionally changed that if value was added in this country, it was product of USA. That opened the door for imported beef to come in mislabeled. I'm not saying there's anything inferior in imported beef. I'm saying it's not a product of the USA, so please don't call it that.
Yeah, and we have to really treat local grown products correctly. I mean, that labeling standard is a labeling standard that the WTO has somehow allowed slide, that you can now, change all of a sudden some of these labeling standards if it's convenient to whatever national imported bilateral relationship there is. And I really find that problematic. I want to share with you, because I know a lot of farmers out there are curious about what happened with the Maha involvement in Trump's Secretary of Agriculture nominee. And it ended up going to Brooke Rollins, who is not someone I've ever come across in the agricultural world, certainly not within the regenerative agriculture world. And I know a lot of farmers out there saw that pic and were really upset. And so I wanted to share with you and our listeners what I saw happen and what happened behind the scenes, what we can expect, how we can continue to mobilize. But, going back to a few weeks ago, there was a committee formed, wonderful, wonderful farmers. You know them, I know them, who were called by Bobby Kennedy's team and the Maha team. And there was a committee put together to put together a list of farmers or entrepreneurs or, leaders in the agriculture space who we would submit for consideration for nomination. And the team that came together, I mean, incredible names. leaders, real true leaders in the soil and regenerative movement came together, put together an exhaustive list, called everybody in the community and said, who is interested in what role, who has the availability. I know you got a call too. Well, because we all adore you. And we submitted that list, and we had really high hopes that someone from our list would get the nomination. And what I heard was that at Mar-a-Lago at the time, there was this horse trading happening, and agriculture was put into a different bucket than the HHS departments. So FDA, CDC, NIH, those all kind of were under Bobby's umbrella. And then we were hoping for ag as well. We really were hoping. I mean, I was very loud about that during our suspension of the campaign and endorsing Trump, was that I had hope that we would get ag, and it would be tremendously transformative. We would fix many of the issues around protecting domestic production. We would work with farmers to help ease the challenge of vertical integration, which is so important, local processing, supply chain management, all of the things that they do pretty well in Europe, some of the things that they do really well in Canada. But in the United States, somehow we have failed so significantly. And so when it came down to the last few days before the ag pick was going to be confirmed, I went out to everybody I knew. I went out to even Steve Bannon, who is literally Donald Trump's biggest supporter. and he was on board. And I was hearing murmurs that at the table at Mar-a-Lago with all of the big decision makers, we got very close. And John Kempf even got close to getting the nomination. And they love the idea of a real regenerative Amish farmer representing an important cabinet position. But something happens, as it always seems to. and we got traded out. We got traded out for Brooke Rollins, who I honestly didn't know much about, but found out she's the CEO of America First Policy Institute, which raised $21 million, and most of that went to the MAGA PAC. And then during the first Trump administration, she was acting director of the United States Domestic Policy Council. And I've heard from a few people, because I did some, sniffing around, trying to figure out what she was actually like. And someone close to that first administration said, well, we feel that she may have sabotaged some of MAGA's efforts during Trump's first term. Quite frankly, I'm not sure what they were referring to. I'm still trying to figure that out. And then I was like, okay, what is her connection to ag? I really want to know. And I found out that she did 4-H as a child. So we have that going for us. But I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm worried. I'm concerned. I heard rumors that maybe our deputy secretary of agriculture might be a Maha farmer. And I'm going to hold out hope that this is somebody that we can work with.
I'll hold out on that hope as well, although I'm not really optimistic about it. We'll see. I'll say this. I'm probably less enthusiastic over who is the Secretary of Agriculture than most people, because, and I hope it'll be different now, but there's been such a failing of the Department of Agriculture in general for a long time. Remember, there's so much money. Big ag, big tech, big food, big whatever. There's so much money that I really don't feel good about a political cure for our economic situation, no matter who the Secretary of Agriculture is. Just so much money going in now. And I'll tell you something else. I have a vision of the way I would like to see farming done in this country. It would be probably not so different from what yours would be, or Mr. Kennedy's, or many other people. But I think we've got to face the fact that we can't do it all of a sudden. I mean, if suddenly the decision was made that everybody's got a farm like me and John Kemp and the others of us, there are hungry people in the world now, and food would go up. The price of, if everybody farmed the way I want them to farm, the price of food would be increased. Now, the reason is because we're not casting off expenses into other areas. There's a I'm about 80 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that's as big as Massachusetts. And it used to be a thriving oystering ground. But it's a dead zone because of the chemical fertilizers and pesticides and other technologies that have washed down the rivers and killed that big area. Now, the cost of that, of fixing that, won't be borne by the farmers or pesticide companies or fertilizer companies that did it. We're going to all bear that cost. Extinction of species is something I think a lot about. And we people, farmers of this country, have contributed to driving so many species of plants and animals and microbes into extinction or near extinction. And that has a huge cost. But the cost is not paid by the pesticide company or the farmers that used it. It's borne by all of us. So this cheap food that we are eating and feeding our people is really not that cheap. It's just that the cost, I can give you many, many examples, dozens of examples of costs being shunted off into another area. But if we were to reabsorb all those costs immediately, I don't know what would happen to the food supply in this country. And I don't want to see that happen. I'd rather have hungry people eat bad food than not have any food.
I don't think that's a choice that we have to make. I think that's a choice that term after term of negligence puts us front and center to. But I don't think that we have to make that trade. I don't think that's where we are. We still have farmable land in this state. So one of the things that Bill Gates is trying to convince us all of, and that most of us, after we do our homework, disagree with him. It's pretty conclusive once you do your homework. You disagree with his findings on cows and methane emissions. He claims that we have to stop all methane emissions from cows and cattle production because it is a serious producer of greenhouse gas, such that it is leading enormously to our climate catastrophe. And what he fails to do is differentiate industrial production of cattle with what you do, which is pasture production and rotational grazing. So just rotational grazing alone changes the equation, the methane equation, enormously. And you've had scientists come out to your farm and study this.
Yes, ma'am. What you said is exactly right. This is a 25-year experiment in which we prove exactly what you just said. A big food company paid an environmental engineering concern from Minneapolis called Qantas, is the name of the environmental engineering company. They paid Qantas to come down here and do what's called an LCA, life cycle assessment. And it showed that the organic matter in my land, my soil here, has gone from 0.5% to 5.5%. Now, it took me 20 years to do it, but it's increased over 10x. And I'll tell you what that means. So if you're a 1% level of organic matter will absorb a 1-inch rainfall. A 1-inch rainfall is 27,000 gallons per acre. So when my land was 0.5% organic matter, it would only absorb a 1/2 inch rainfall, and the rest of it ran out to the Gulf of Mexico, where I mentioned earlier. Today it's 5.5%. My land will now absorb a 5.5-inch rainfall, and we get them here. So it's just an incredible difference, and every bit of that carbon, that's a lot of tons of carbon in 3,200 acres of land. Every bit of that carbon came from, used to be greenhouse gas. We hadn't put any carbon out. All of that carbon from 0.5% to 5.5% was greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, and other gases in the atmosphere that, through the magic of photosynthesis, was breathed in by the plants, turned into plant material, leaves and stems above the ground, and roots below the ground. And we do graze our cattle intermittently, and that, so my cattle will bite it off, then we'll let it rest for 60 or 90 days. It'll grow back again, pulling those gases down, leaving manure and urine on the land, leaving those roots. If you grow this much forage above the land, you're growing that much root below the land. And when the cattle eat it off, those roots slough off, and that carbon is held in that soil, and the organic matter is going up and up and up, and that's the life of the soil. And it's beautiful.
It's such a beautiful cycle. I mean, I could listen to that cycle discussed all day long because it's so life enforcing.
The way you get organic matter in the soil is to graze it, and to graze it properly. And the anti-animal agriculture people, vegans, vegetarians, people who make plant-based diets, whoever they are really shining the bright light on the confinement animal feeding system that does do these bad things. It does put greenhouse gases up and does deplete the soil. But that's not what we do. That's not what we do.
Yeah. You know what's really fascinating? So I was studying methane emissions in the United States, and 13% of the state of Pennsylvania's greenhouse gas emissions are from wells that are leaking methane, not from cows, wells. And those wells are protected under this very interesting law that states that if a well is active, it's allowed to get away with certain leakage because it's listed as active. And there's a presumption that with every active well, there's going to be some degree of leakage. And so many of the owners of these wells will take an inactive well that is leaking, list it as active so that they don't have to pay to plug the well. So this is happening all over the United States, but just in one state alone, it accounts for 13% of the state's emissions. It's not the cows. I just want to make that clear. It's not the cows. And for sure, it's not any of the cows coming off of Amish farmland in Pennsylvania. So we don't hear Mr. Gates talk about this ever. We don't hear him going out and putting together a program to cap those wells when he absolutely should be if he genuinely cared about this issue. What we do see him doing, though, is erecting corporations, which then produce, supplements. And, in other cases, he's orthogonally invested in meat alternatives and lab-grown meat products. And he's pushing vaccines, mRNA vaccines on cattle in the United States. I mean, to me, he's so obviously a bad actor that anyone who thinks otherwise really has got to get their head checked.
The whole introduction of technology into modern agriculture uh, has has fell upon itself in a way that I would not have believed possible. You know, when I was an industrial farmer, every day I went into my pastures and I literally looked for something to kill. You know, I looked for a plant or an animal or a microbe, insect, something that I could use a side on. Side, you know, homicide means kill people, insecticides kill insects, fungicides kill fungus. And I was really good at knowing what side, what poison to put out to correct a given problem. And what I have come to realize in my old age is that every side I used to correct a problem caused another problem that required another side. And they're highly efficacious. Those sides, those pesticides are highly efficacious on correcting the problem you have focused on. But invariably, they break the cycles of nature and cause another problem that requires another pesticide. You know, and all this started post World War II, and I don't believe that when my dad's generation went in the pesticide business of using pesticides, that it was intentional, that the harm was intentional, nor was this chain reaction that we do today intentional, but it evolved. And I think it's very intentional now. I think that the people who do that for a living know that when they sell the farmer this product, this technology that will kill something that they perceive as a pest, it's going to create another opportunity, and it's never ending. And as a result, I think that the latest report I said was 14 point something cents of the food dollar goes to the farmer. Was a lot of costs that go out of that. You know, on my farm here, I get 100 cents of every dollar if I sell it through my online store, in my restaurant, or however. Now, that might seem that we're making a lot of profit doing that, and we are profitable. But in the poorest county in America, I'm in Clay County, Georgia, poorest county in America, my payroll is $100,000 a week, 52 weeks a year. So it's not, we are keeping the money here, but it's not here at White Oak Pastures, it's here in this impoverished community.
So we could really re innovate rural communities by supporting vertical integration of our meat production.
Vertical integration is exactly what does it. It's exactly when I 25 years ago, when I chose to cease to be an industrial commodity monocultural cattle farmer, improving Bluffton, Georgia, this little town I'm in, was not on my radar. I did it for the land and the animals. But when I did, I went from having 3 or 4 minimum wage employees to 160 employees that make well above the county average, because I was farming differently. And I can remember the day I had a guest here, a visitor, he was trying to sell me something, and I didn't buy it. But when we got through the conversation, he said, "This is a nice little town. I've been in business for a while." And I was waiting for the punchline. I thought it was going to be a joke, and he meant it. And I looked and I said, "Yeah, this is a nice little town." And we set about the business of making it a nice little town, and it is.
Yeah. It's a wonderful town. And I had the opportunity to meet with some of the people that work with you. And it is a busy operation, but there's something about it that feels like everyone has a stake. You know, everyone takes pride in their work, everyone takes pride in the opportunity to come to this beautiful farm every single day to see the vastness of the pastures. And, I have to say, seeing healthy cattle move from one pasture to another and seeing them from the beginning of, like, just watching the sun travel over the land and just seeing the life force in these animals is so very inspiring, because the health of the land, you can tell, gets somehow absorbed into the tissue of those animals. And those animals, they shine. They shine in the sunlight. They need to be outside. They need to be breathing fresh air and exposed to direct sunlight, just like humans.
Well, that's very perceptive of you. And when nature, the only real wealth I think there is the bounty of nature. What nature spins off as a bounty when all of these cycles are operating optimally. There's the mineral cycle, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, the microbial cycle, grazing cycle, all these cycles. And when those cycles are operating optimally, it spins off an abundance. All that oil and coal and gas in the ground that we've been living on for the last 100 years, that's the bounty of nature during the era of the dinosaur. And we have short-circuited that, and we no longer live on the bounty of nature. And what we did here, very intentionally, is restart the cycles of nature so it would again generate a bounty, and that's what we live on.
And it's possible. Your farm, before you started doing this in the 90s, was going through some hard times. The soil wasn't producing the same level of grazing opportunities for the cows. The cows weren't getting the same nutrition without having to increase purchased inputs. And you had to make this really difficult call to change the way you farmed. And that's the number one criticism I hear of regenerative farming today, is that it is expensive and too difficult to transition to, and that it is unrealistic. So the question I'd love to ask is, we're trying to inspire people to undertake this very challenging task of converting conventional styles of farming to what you do, which is full integration or partial integration. It doesn't have to be the full thing, but going from a breeding, calf breeding operation to full scale packaging and processing. That's a big jump for a lot of people. How do we do it today? And one of the top complaints I hear is that the cost of capital is way too high right now. Interest rates on loans are just way too high, and farmers just don't get a break.
Well, it's going to be a very difficult task. Anything I can do to help you, I'd like to help with that. But the best help I can be up front is tell you it's going to be difficult. My friends and neighbors, and I'm the only person that farms like I farm in this greater community. My friends and neighbors and relatives that farm, most of them do, still farm very, very industrially. And they farm the way their dad taught them how, their granddad taught them how, the county agent taught them how, the University of Georgia taught them how. Certainly the representatives of the pesticide, herbicide, fertilizer companies. And as I told you earlier, this way of doing business is not a lot more profitable. There's more profitable for the community, but for the individual, because you're not throwing off all those costs, you're not making a lot more money. So it's not easy for these people to make that transition. But it's very difficult. My friends and neighbors and relatives that farm industrially are good people. It would be easier for me to talk about what dastardly people do that. That's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that are farming the way they've been taught to farm.
Mm-hmm.
and the commitment. You know, a cotton picker costs well over $1 million, and it won't do a doggone thing but pick cotton. So they have such a huge investment that's just very difficult for those people. And I'm not saying so you shouldn't try. I'm just warning you of the size of the task ahead. Anything I can do to help, I will.
Well, let's talk about loans. So, one of the strategies Europe has employed, and it's not ubiquitous across all of Europe and all farm loans, but is a category of farm loans in Europe that are zero interest.
Money matters, and that will go a long way. It may be highly efficacious because I feel like you can train new farmers easier than you can rehabilitate existing successful industrial farmers. So being able to borrow money for zero interest is very attractive. We're doing some refinancing here right now. We have debt, and as I built this business, I borrowed a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there.
It's very common.
Very common. And we're now consolidating that, and it's daunting, and the interest is staggering, and so that I think that would go a long way. Teaching people how to do it is very important. The land grant universities are not, that I know of, are not going to be where that happens. And we formed a 501c3, and I'm real proud of it. But it's a tiny little thing, and I don't need to blow it up into a big one, but there needs to be a lot of them. If someone is going to farm in respecting the cycles of nature, it would really be better for them to learn how to farm in the ecosystem they're going to be operating in. If the cycles of nature operate the same, whether it's mountain, desert, prairie, coastal plain, but it manifests itself very differently. So having a lot of little training areas would probably be important.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I know that you are chock full of recommendations for future Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, as does our community. And I hope that she watches this. I hope that she hears us all. She hears you. She hears the countless other farmers who are working so hard to do the right thing and have pulled it off. But there are numerous things we can do, from addressing the farm credit system, which does not help good farmers. It helps large, industrial sized farms, but has done nothing beneficial for good family farmers like yourself. I can count 50 reforms we could do in this administration that would dramatically change things. Supply management systems for dairy is one of them too. Making local processing facilities more accessible, helping farmers bring on-site packaging and processing. The list goes on, doesn't it?
And this is my invitation to Secretary Rollins or her agents or her people to come to White Oak Pastures. We have lodging, we have a restaurant. I'll sleep them, I'll feed them, and let me show you a path, not the only path, but a path that probably deserves a little consideration. Please come.
And it's the best burger you'll ever have. Oh, I really can vouch for that.
Maybe you can come with them when they come.
Oh, I'll be there in a heartbeat. I got to pick up some of that milk too that you sell in your shop. Well, thank you. It is always a pleasure to catch up with you. Please say hi to your family for me. Say hi to those beautiful cows. One day I have a dream of, buying a bull from you or two. I mean, it's just such an incredible operation you have there, and it's a dream come true. So thanks for bringing that forward for all of us to experience.
You're welcome here anytime. Hope you'll come back to see us.
Will do. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.